Well, what a difference a month makes. Today's episode of Real Trail Talk was recorded a month ago before the COVID-19 pandemic had resulted in the closures of regions in Western Australia. As such, references to trips in April are no longer true. Hi, and welcome to a non-track and non-trail episode of Real Trail Talk. I am Donovan D'Souza from The Long Ways Better.
And I'm Mark Pybus from The Life of Pi. Welcome to episode 58. It is part 2 of our snorkelling extravaganza of WA. And this episode we're going to cover off north of Perth. So welcome back, Shavaurn. Thank you for joining us again.
My pleasure.
So I guess we'll do the reverse of what we did last podcast, and we'll start from Perth and head north.
Yeah.
So there's quite a few spots all along the coast that you can go to, but WA being quite large, they are spaced out a fair bit. But the first one being Lanceland, which is a pretty good spot if you can pick it in the right conditions.
Yeah, so Lanceland is not a long drive, not far from Perth. You've got Lanceland Island, so you can kayak out over to Lanceland Island. A lot of local people do this to get out of the wind, so you can be set up in the lee side of the island and enjoy a beach day on Lanceland Island. There's also a reef on the other side in a similar fashion to Penguin Island. The good snorkeling's on the windward side of the island, so if you wanted to do that side, you'd have to pick your weather conditions. There are also some sea lions that frequent the island as well, so safety first with the sea lions, obviously giving them all due care. It's a little known, sort of little talked about spot, Lanceland. It's a great town, love going there, snorkeling or otherwise,
because it's a crayfishing kind of mecca, so I'm imagining there is like limestone formations with lots of cool little slots to attract fish and whatnot.
Even the bay right out of the front, the sort of kite beach there, it's very shallow, so it can be tricky to go in between the reef formations, but so beautiful. And just having a good little shallow snorkel, that's where you don't really want the really long fins. You want the shorter fins, so they get a little bit cumbersome, but you will see lots of interesting formations and swim throughs there. And the Lanceland dolphins will frequent the bay every day. Usually they'll come in and pop up at some points during the day, and why drive all the way to Monkey Mire when you've got the Lanceland dolphins just an hour and a half up the road. Lanceland's just really popular with all sorts of sports, like your four-wheel drivers and surfers and all types of people. It's a good fun place for everybody's activities, except hiking.
That's Cervantes, sorry. But speaking of Cervantes, Jurien Bay, the closest bigger town to Cervantes, and there's a few good snorkeling spots there along that jetty area. They have a snorkel trail, which I'm not sure it's in great condition.
No,
but it's a
sure
good
you
start.
rated it, Don.
No, last time I was there, I sort of went in and had a look, and it was just terrible. And the local tour, like the people who, I think it was at the hotel, said, "Nah, don't go do it. It's in bad condition."
Yeah. We skipped it as well. We went out to the pontoons and the jetty.
Yeah. But, definitely worth doing in Jurien Bay is the sea lion tours. They're not very expensive, and I think that they are really worth doing. You go out on a boat, and they take you to where the sea lions are, and they tell you what to do, so it's safe. You get in the water, and you basically just have to do flips and stuff in the water, and then they'll come to you and go, "Oh, I can do that too," and they do the flips.
Oh, they're just gorgeous. They're just gorgeous. From what I understand, up at Jurien and higher is the mums and babies. So sea lions, apparently it's the dads who live in their bachelor pads at Karnak, Rottnest, Seal Island down in Rockingham, and most of the year they're to themselves, and then the mums are kind of up Jurien way, and they'll mate, and then they'll go back to their own lives. Mums will raise the babies until next mating season, and then they'll get back together and do their thing. And so that's why they're so playful and so cute, because it's the little baby faces.
It sounds horrifying and also quite enjoyable at the same time as a male.
Yeah, and that's why they can be the more aggressive sea lions. So being careful around the Perth sea lions is important because they're the males. apparently.
The other thing that they did when we went out on the tour there was they took us to a section of reef as well that was out there. So after we did, swam with all the little puppy dogs, we went out to another spot, and they had bits of coral there. It wasn't quite as good as Rottnest, but it was cool to do something else and see those. And there was sort of like bommies out to sea there. Yeah, so it was definitely worth doing.
So moving on further north, we have Dynamite Bay, which you didn't really rate that well, did you, Donovan?
Yeah, I had a look, and I think it was just a little bit, the weather wasn't great. The area there looks kind of Rottnest-esque, like there's that limestone, but it looked a bit murky. But there were, people with like jet skis out, so it wasn't the best time. I'm sure if you get the conditions right, it'll be worth doing, but it wasn't when we went.
What do you call jet skis again?
The dirt bikes of the sea.
And much further north is the Houtman Abrolhos Islands. A little bit offshore. It requires a boat to get to, doesn't it?
Boat or a plane.
Yeah. But good snorkeling from what I've seen.
Yeah, amazing snorkeling. So you can catch a day trip. A day tripper flight from Geraldton will take you over to East Wallaby Island and land there. They'll show you around some of the sites on East Wallaby, and then there's a snorkel trail right there, and you'll be able to snorkel on that and then fly back again. That's a popular option. Otherwise, you may have a friend who's in Geraldton, or be able to private charter or go out on the Eco Abrolhos, which is a liveaboard trip that'll take you over, and it's just spectacular. So there's just a plate coral, just a spectacular plate coral, and to my mind it's even better than Ningaloo. So because I suppose it's that little bit further offshore and that little bit less accessible, it's just teeming with life, and it's of course a very popular fishing spot. So you'll see when you're snorkeling ball-chin groper and all these large fish that are popular with the fishermen, as well as crayfish. So many crayfish. So it's just spectacular. It's, we don't want to really talk about it too much, otherwise too many people will end up going. They've actually made it a national park, so that'll be interesting for the future of the tourism and the future of the sustainability of the islands and what's going to happen there. But just a jewel of a place.
So you're allowed to stay on the island, or do you have to stay on the
Yeah,
boat
you're
tours?
not, unless you're you have a friend who's a cray fisherman with a fisherman's license and a shack, so you're actually not allowed to stay on the island. If you have a friend with a boat and you're staying on their boat, you're allowed to. That's its access is really, really limited, so that makes it a little bit unfair, a little bit inaccessible. But if you ever can have the opportunity, I highly recommend it. It's just stunning. One of the things that I would like to do is the coordinates for the Batavia are available, and you can, on the right conditions, snorkel that side. It's a little deep. It's 9 to 10 meters or so, I believe, and that's definitely on my bucket list to do, is to snorkel the actual wreck side of the Batavia. So most people would know the story. Significant WA history, but really want to do that.
And on the island, do you get to see where they hung and cut off the hands of the traders?
I don't think that there's any evidence of that archaeology remaining, but there is the jail that Weber Hayes actually housed Euronymous Cornelius in. I think that is officially the first building ever on Australian land or soil. It's credited as the very first building. You can't see it from East Wallaby Island, though. You have to, I think it's, I don't know, forget which island it's on, but it's still there, I believe. And of course the wallabies are still there. They're really integral in how the people survived.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating place.
So further north, we move from Geraldton area to Kalbarri and the Blue Holes. So this area is kind of more cliffy.
Yeah, not a great spot except for this one area. So unlike everywhere else where we've looked at, which is mostly either granite or limestone, this is sandstone, and there's a little bit of sandstone reef at Blue Holes where you can snorkel in, and it's not a big area, but I found the fish really interesting there because you get a mix of the stuff that you could see on Rottnest, as well as some of the stuff that is more like you're more likely to see in like Ningaloo. So it was a cool sort of halfway point where I could see things. I was like, oh yeah, I've seen these guys at Rottnest, and then later I didn't realize because it wasn't till later that we went to Ningaloo, but I saw things at Ningaloo there as well. So interesting spot. You know, I wouldn't head to Kalbarri just to snorkel, but if you're there, it's worth doing because it's something different. Because I think once you've done all the hikes, there's like the bird museum or whatever. There's not a lot more to do, and this is a cool other thing to do.
I suppose it's a good mix of normally we're snorkeling too because we can't hike, whereas up in Kalbarri you can hike and snorkel, so it's a good way to mix up the holiday.
Yeah.
Is that Quobba?
Yes, that's so heading like Carnarvon way, north of Carnarvon.
So moving a bit further north to the western part, you kind of got the bit that sticks out from WA, all those islands, and you've got Shark Bay and Dirk Hartog Island. It's not a lot of snorkeling, but it's still pretty cool to explore.
I think the name Shark Bay doesn't invite a lot of snorkeling, but yeah, I hear that Dirk Hartog Island is a very good spot. But if it's quite expensive to get to, and you have to have a 4-wheel drive to get to Steep Point or there.
Is there anything off Francois Peron National Park?
A lot of tiger sharks.
Yeah, I had a look at the waters, and it didn't look inviting at all. And when you see all the dolphins with bite marks on them, that could be you.
When you can literally see the tiger sharks swimming around from the lookouts, you think that could be you as well.
Okay. So only if you really, really want to bite the dust do you go snorkeling up there. Moving on to like the Carnarvon area, we've got Quobba and the aquarium. Is this getting more towards Ningaloo style reef?
Yeah, so the aquarium is that sort of area there is considered the southernmost point of the Ningaloo reef, and the aquarium is a spot that Alyssa and I nearly went to, but we didn't realize where it was. And also, when you're heading down to Quobba, the first thing you see is a sign that says King Waves Kill, and then you see these massive blowholes, and it's the most impressive blowholes I've ever seen anywhere. They're just shooting up all this water, and you just go, maybe I don't want to snorkel here. But apparently the aquarium is a sheltered area. I've seen videos online of a lot of fish, a lot of coral, so I think we are going to go check it out on the way up. We're heading there in April, and we'll check it out. Quobba recently got a bit of fame because Chris Hemsworth stayed there and had a wonderful holiday.
And Matt Damon.
Yeah, his bro date.
He said that was one of his favourite trips, so I haven't been, but apparently it's really good, and there is snorkeling in the Quobba, the homestead area there as well.
And then we get on to the big ticket item, which is Ningaloo and Coral Bay. So I'll let you guys wax lyrical over all of this.
So I guess Coral Bay is the first of the two settlements that are the bases for the area, for Ningaloo. And it really is... So I didn't do this one first. I did Exmouth first. But it is really interesting to see, like, it literally is, 2 meters out into the water, and there's coral. And a lot of coral. It's not the most exciting looking coral. It's very brown looking. And it's not that it's dead. That's just the color. But there's just so much of it. And Bills Bay is literally, you can step out of one of the resorts or caravan parks and you're there. South of there, there's also a place called Five Finger Reef. It needs to be accessed by 4-wheel drive or a long walk. So we didn't go last time.
If only you have a website that champions this long way.
Well, it was more that we could walk there, or we could go on a tour, which we did. So we did a tour out into the bay area there to see the manta rays. And the tour took us out into areas there that would not be accessible, and it was actually more interesting because you're heading out to the outer reef. So they took us out to an area called the Maze, which is part of the kayak trail in Coral Bay. And the sights out there were really amazing because the coral is more What?
Amazing maze.
I hadn't noticed that. Yeah, it really is fantastic because there was just so much more life out there. Because I think there's less people. It's further away. It's heading more towards the outer reef, and we saw sharks. We saw a lot of sea turtles. Saw manta rays. So definitely worth doing. So we were there in October, which is not the right time to be there because it's not whale shark season. But there was still a lot to see and a lot to do. And definitely recommended it.
There's multiple seasons. So up there in January, it's turtle season. I think it's, April to August is whale shark season. And then you have manta ray season another time. So you're really winning all year round at Ningaloo.
Yeah, so they had the whale migration comes through in October. So that was something else that they've just started doing. So
it's a trial humpback swimming in the area.
Yeah, and I think that's been going well. So I think it probably will become a thing. And that probably extends the season for them basically almost the whole year where there'll be something to do at any time that you're there.
I've heard this year the whale sharks are early, like now, early March they've been spotted, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that makes me feel happy about going because the big worry is that you go and it's not going to be there, but if they've come early then that's a good sign. But I guess moving north of there to Cape Range, which is the part that's most accessible from the Exmouth area. And when was the last time that you went up there?
January of 2018.
Okay.
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And do you want to tell us about, you mentioned the place at the Navy Pier?
Oh yeah, the Navy Pier is a really world famous, is still or was in the top 10 of the world's best dives, the Navy Pier. So it's not a snorkel, you can't just do it. You actually have to book with one of the only dive company that will do it. They rotate around who's allowed to take a charter to the Navy Pier because it is actually a legitimate Navy Pier. So there's a lot of security surrounding it. So when you book in and you go on the bus, you have to get off the bus. They check all your IDs. If you're written down in the wrong order, you've got to do it all again. They're very clear about this when you do the charter, not to muck around, not to make any jokes about anything, and off they do. They take you to the Navy Pier. But it's a scuba only, but just incredible. So huge, big potato cod, lots of white-tip reef sharks, all kinds of life, huge coral. It's fantastic. Stingrays, just a forest of schooling fish. It's stunning. So if you have your dive ticket, or if you're traveling in the area, it's a good thing to get the dive ticket just to do that dive.
Awesome. And I guess for other people, you mentioned there's kayak trails as well in the area?
Oh, yeah. So there are a couple of kayak trails on the other side, the Cape Range side of the peninsula. So at Tantabiddi Boat Ramp, there's a kayak trail. You paddle out, I think it's only 2 or 3 kilometres. You go out there and there's moorings. You'll spot these particular coloured moorings where you can kayak out to different points and then go back, or you can tie up your kayak to one of the moorings, hop out and have a snorkel. So Tantabiddi is kind of a circular reef and quite shallow in some areas depending on the tide, but you can circle your way on the inside and circle your way on the outside and have a good look at the reef there. It's beautiful. So the visitors centre is a really good spot to drop in and get the information about the hot spots for snorkeling and the kayak trails. It's all in the publications. Really handy.
And I guess the big ticket place here is Turquoise Bay, which makes a lot of like best beaches in Australia. And I think it's probably one of the easiest and accessible places for snorkeling in the area.
Yeah, you've got 2 options at Turquoise Bay. You've got the drift snorkel and you've got just sort of snorkeling in the bay side. So it's quite a strong current that goes through. So you would start at the south side of Turquoise Bay. You walk a little way. As you drive in, there's 2 options for your car park. There's the drift snorkel option and you've got the bay option as well. So you park in the drift snorkel option and walk as far as you want to the south and walk out as far as you want to, and then as you snorkel you'll kind of get pulled along by the current and you should not proceed further than the point. It'll sort of whip you out a little bit and you'll be swimming against a current to get back into the bay, so keeping within your own limits. But Turquoise Bay, beautiful snorkel, white tip reef sharks and all kinds of turtles. You'll be it's just it speaks for itself. Everyone knows Turquoise Bay, really. Everyone who's been up there, or you know, it's the snorkel.
When we went there, we saw on the first day we did the bay side, and we saw the blue spotted rays. We saw turtles, a lot of fish. The other side, the amount of coral is ridiculous, and just it was really interesting throughout that whole area. We saw some of Nemo's cousins. Saw a lot of interesting things, and the visibilities was good when we went. I think the fact that you can just kind of drift and take it easy, as long as you get out before the sandbar, you're good. And it's something that we certainly had on our bucket list of going back to do. And we, even though it's inconvenient to drive to from Exmouth, we went almost every day.
Yeah. It's well worth it.
Yeah.
Because with snorkeling, you're always going to see something different every day. Or every snorkel's going to be different. It's always worth doing. You always get out going, well, that was worth doing.
Yeah. And the other, I guess, famous place there is Oyster Stacks, which we didn't get to because we just kept going back. But you've been to Oyster Stacks?
Oh, it's family friendly, Oyster Stacks, but you do have to be aware of the tide. So the visitor centre has the tide charts and makes a clear indication of when it's going to be good for Oyster Stacks, because otherwise it's too shallow for you there and you're not going to see anything. So you can't go in on a low tide. You have to really watch out for that one.
Right. And Blue Holes was the other side.
Near out from Sal Salis, the glamping area, there is you can kayak out towards the main reef, and there's it's large bommies, and at kind of maybe a 10-metre sort of depth. So most of the offshore snorkelling at Ningaloo is quite shallow, whereas this is a bit of a deeper spot, and you get these large bommies, large coral formations, and bigger fish as well to see. We did sneak our kayaks through the break in the reef, which was a little bit nerve-wracking to do, because you don't want your kayak to be swamped by waves and things. We did have a look on the outer side of the reef as well, but at that time there wasn't much to see, so inside the reef was the way to go at that spot.
And of course, the big ticket item is the whale sharks. And have you done the whale sharks?
I haven't yet, but definitely on the bucket list.
Yeah. So that's that. So I've heard people have the misconception that because with Ningaloo, the big attraction is you can just walk off into the beach into the coral. But to go and see the whale sharks, you're going to the outer reef, and you generally do have to go in a boat.
It's way too shallow for a whale shark in the inner reef.
Because I have heard people say that, say, I really want to go to Ningaloo. I hear, you can just get in the water and you can see whale sharks. I said, it's not technically correct.
No. If you take a picture of a whale shark.
So, Alyssa and I have that booked in April, so hopefully we'll see some whale sharks.
It's an interesting way they do it, though. It's not just like you're on a boat and they find a whale shark and then put you in the water. They literally drop you in the water, drive off, and then hope that the whale shark, they know where the whale shark's going to go roughly, and it just cruises on by. So if you're afraid of the open water, it's a little bit nerve-wracking, I've heard.
Right. I did not know that. We'll find out.
Yeah.
I think they use the spotter planes, and they've got it down to a really fine art. So they've been doing it for a long time, and their tour charter companies really work quite harmoniously together to give everyone a really good experience, is what I've heard.
Yeah. I guess it may be a bit daunting, but if you want to take something off the bucket list, sometimes you have to take the challenge, and it is what it is. So look forward to it. And also, if you do want to go to other areas, there's Muiryan Islands.
The Muiryan Islands are to the northeast of the peninsula, and the dive charters will get you there. You can either scuba or you can opt to be a snorkeler for the day. Really, really beautiful. So I was there in January again. This was turtle season. So those islands are really shallow, sandy cays, and you could just see track along these islands where the turtles have crawled up, laid their eggs, and crawled out again. And then as we were boating towards the shallows to do our trip, to do our snorkel, you could just see circle throughout the water, and they're all turtles, ... all in the shallows. And then, of course, during the snorkel, you're coming across all these beautiful, cruisy little turtles throughout. So really beautiful. So it's about, maybe for your diving, it's maybe 11, 12 meters. So not a super deep dive, but it's great for snorkeling. And diving, obviously, shallow means you can be down for longer. So it's just a winner. It's beautiful. So a little bit less accessible, so a little bit more life, I think.
And you said the turtles lay the eggs in the shallows, so they're not the ones that...
No, in the sand. So
in the sand.
they laying their eggs and then they scoot back out into the shallows.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, they definitely lay in the sand. Yeah, turtle hatching season. So yeah.
So further north, obviously, there's a lot more to explore in WA. Rolly Shoals is one that you guys have got on your bucket list.
Yeah, it looks awesome. There's all these sort of, coral islands off the coast, and it's a protected marine park. I think the coral there, because of the extreme tidal conditions, they've said like some of those corals are really resilient to climate change because they're so used to extreme conditions. Although I think they did have some bleaching recently. But there's I think the season is only in September, October, and you can go out on boats, and they're sort of liverboards, and they take you every day to different places in the area. Bit expensive, but certainly a bucket list item thing that I'd love to do one day.
Yeah, and mine's the Montebello Islands. I'd really like to go up there. There's just all these islands dotted off the coast, just so much to explore. And also, because I'm a keen kite surfer, it looks just like excellent, really off-piste kiting conditions.
And an island that's technically part of WA, but more looks like a Pacific tropical island is the Cocos Keeling. Do you guys know what the snorkeling and the diving around there is like?
Yeah, I've been to the Cocos Keeling Islands. So you fly up through Christmas Island and then across to Cocos. They've got a couple of great snorkeling opportunities there. One famous one's the Rip on Direction Island. It's a little bit like the drift snorkel at Turquoise Bay and Exmouth. So you'll go over either on a charter or on the ferry over to Direction Island, spend the day there, and the Rip is so fast you have to do this drift snorkel a few times because there's just so much to see, and you're like, oh, there it goes. Oh, look at that. Oh. Like it's a really strong rip, so you have to be a bit prepared to kind of cut a few laps on that one, and just in general. So I went out with a few locals, and they were spearfishing, and all these little sharks come along and have a good look at you, but they're very shy. So as soon as you look their way, they turn around. Oh, I wasn't looking at you. Yeah, they call them grey reef sharks, and they're quite a bit bigger and much more intimidating than any of your other reef sharks. They look like a significant shark, but they're very, very shy. So as soon as you make eye contact, they're off. They don't want to know you. But really, really outstanding snorkeling at the Cocos Keeling Islands if you ever manage to get yourself there, if you're find yourself travelling closer to Indonesia than WA.
Yeah, the guy I used to play cricket with who was stationed there for work, and he just loved it. Like, he came back brown and just relaxed, and yeah, he loved it there. So I guess we'll finish with maybe a discussion about Ningaloo compared to maybe the Great Barrier Reef, and maybe why it's a little bit underrated as a destination.
Well, just in my personal opinion, my experience of the Great Barrier Reef tourism was that it's really en masse tourism. So you'll go there and the Great Barrier Reef is not as close to the shore at all as Ningaloo is. So you have to get on a large charter boat. Their capacity is 200 people, 300 people. And it's, to my mind, a little bit more of that sort of cattle kind of experience. It's not very individualized. You feel like you're one of many, not getting a really unique experience. So they'll go out to the reef on these large ferries. You're in a roped off area. The reef is, not as populated, not as great for fish viewing, and it's just my personal opinion that Ningaloo is really an individual and personal experience. You can just literally turn up, put your snorkel on, walk into the shore, and you're going to see things. You're going to see coral gardens. You're going to see reef sharks and things like that. So, to my mind, it's just that little bit more rugged, that little bit more niche market. That's just how I'm feeling about it.
I've heard it referred to as being the more egalitarian and democratic reef area because. You could be someone from a fairly poor working family, and you could stay in a tent, and afford to go and not have to pay to go on tours every day. If you stay in Coral Bay, there's all those, caravan parks and things like that, and you can just walk into the water. Whereas if you were to do the same thing on Great Barrier, it would cost a lot more to do that. And yes, there is the sort of question of the cost of coming to Western Australia, but the government are offering subsidised flights at the moment, so you can get cheaper fares if you book. I think with Qantas 45 days in advance, they're quite reasonable, and I think that it stacks up when you look at the fact that you don't have to book a tour every time you want to go for a snorkel.
Yeah, and just these pontoons that you go out and it's this large pontoon that's permanently situated at the reef. I wouldn't like to see that happening over here in WA. It's really setting up for that really en masse tourism. And if we're talking about Omeo as getting a little bit flogged in the summer, imagine how that sort of scale would impact upon such delicate ecosystems. Yeah, I wouldn't like to see that sort of tourism implemented here. And indeed, look at the reporting on the Great Barrier Reef and how it's suffering at the moment with bleaching and deterioration and possible loss of its World Heritage listing. So we wouldn't like the same thing to happen over here.
No, definitely not. No.
And on that point, I guess this applies to everywhere, but as a snorkeler, there are certain things you can do to protect the reef. So if you are going out, look for sunscreens that don't have zinc in them, because they are reef killers, and if there's a lot of people using sunscreen, it does build up. So try and find brands that don't have the zincs in them. I know it's really hard these days, but it's probably the least you could do if you really care about the reef.
It's like what you said in the previous episode. We always wear long sleeve in the water, and we always look, everyone's all looking trendy in their board shorts or bikinis, and we always look a bit like nerdy with our long sleeve, but it's just because we don't want to get burnt, and it's worth it, I think, if you're going to be out for a long period of time, and especially if, as we all are as outdoor people, that we're at higher risk because we're always outdoors.
That's right. Yeah, it just makes sense. I think it's just us, our age, we're just sensible now. But in addition to those sort of tips about the sunscreen, not touching the reef, not standing on the reef would also be things you wouldn't want to do. And sometimes you do need to grip on to stop yourself floating away. Gently do that, and wear gloves to avoid stings.
You talked a fair amount about sharks and how shy they are, but it is a common topic around snorkeling is, what about sharks? And I guess people are referring to great whites here.
Or tiger sharks.
In your experience, is it that much of a worry?
Well, I mean, I'm only speaking from one person's experience, but in my opinion, it would really affect my life if I stopped doing these activities that I enjoy because of that fear. And I just think that the risk does not outweigh the reward. So, everybody's different and everybody has a different experience. But I feel that I used to be a little bit afraid when I was starting snorkeling and I was younger. But I feel like the more snorkeling you do and the more looking in the ocean that you do, you see, well, there are interesting things down here, but there's not that many scary things. In fact, it's quite a delight to see something like a large stingray or a reef shark. It's, a big creature is cool to come across. And you sort of get this understanding that when you put your head under the water, it's not like you're going to swim right into a big herd of great white sharks. It's just not that way. I think people should not limit themselves to, not stepping in the ocean, I think. But, I don't know how to resolve that for people. It's up to themselves.
I think it's something that I know I felt a lot of trepidation. Like I actually, when I was in high school, used to get out of doing biathlons where there was swimming because I didn't want to get eaten by sharks. Yep. It was during a time when Cottesloe was constantly getting people eaten. So, but it's something that as I've embraced snorkeling, I've had to get over. And probably if you said to me 5 years ago that a stingray is going to swim past you, maybe only 2 meters from you, I would have been horrified by that. But when it happened, it was just like, as long as I wasn't out of its way and didn't hurt it, and it didn't whack me with a barb, I was fine. And I think that that's something that the more you go out, you just realize that it is probably mostly not dangerous.
I think the scarier one to worry about is the blue rings. So my dad over the summer, he pulls his cray pots and, 3 or 4 were falling out of the cray pots every time. They're much more out there than the great whites. So everybody will watch out for those.
Because you hear the horror stories of like going out swimming and like the kid will reach into his pocket or something of his boardies, or like dad will reach in and just like pull out a blue ring, and you occasionally get like the idiot tourists that think that they're not dangerous and hold them. You're like, what are you doing?
Or just beach combing. Sometimes a blue ring has made a pretty shell its home, and they'll crawl out after. You've heard stories of people cleaning the shells at home and then, oh, look at this, look, good thing we didn't have that in our pocket.
I guess it's just being safe in the water and just being aware as well of what's around you.
I think the more time you spend in the water, the more confident you become, and that's both for any danger you feel, like whether it's swimming through, you start small, or whether it's approaching your fear of sharks, you start gently, and you learn, you grow, you move forward, and then you become really keen enthusiasts like us.
Or you do the hiker thing. If you're afraid of bears, you just hike with a slower person that you can outrun. I guess snorkeling wise, you just swim with a not very good swimmer.
Yeah, and as I've said before with hiking, I said to die through misadventure is not a bad way to go.
Yeah, I always tell people, look, I've had a happy life. You can be wary of conditions, though, as well. There's better conditions to go out in than not. So dawn and dusk are not ideal times for snorkeling anyway, for visibility, but supposedly not the safest times in terms of being wary of sharks. So just taking due care. Maybe being careful of salmon season down in Margaret River and when the salmon runs on. Same sort of thing. Just being aware of what's happening in cycles of nature.
Or of a whale.
Oh, well,
Yes.
whale
rocks
carcass.
up.
Yep.
On a
At
beach.
least you'll know they're well fed then. All right, well, I guess that is the end of the episode. Thank you very much, Shavaurn, for coming in. It's been great to have you on and get all your knowledge about the great spots we have in WA.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode or any other episode of Real Trail Talk, then please rate us on whatever platform you're currently listening to us on. Ratings really help for us to reach an audience and for people who maybe are looking to learn about the outdoors in Western Australia and Australia in general. If you had any questions or any suggestions for future episodes, you can email us at realtrailtalk@gmail.com, or you can contact us through our social media channels. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back in 2 weeks.